Shawshank Redemption is known as one of the most heavily guarded prisons in the world. Thousands of inmates are locked up inside, and not a single one has ever managed to escape. Some prisoners have spent their entire lives behind these walls, yet they never even think about running away. Because anyone who tries is met with only one punishment: death. The scene cuts, and we're taken to a courtroom where a man named Andy is standing trial. Andy was a banker at a major financial institution in America. He's accused of murdering his wife and her lover. The judge sentences him to life in prison. Andy insists he didn't commit the crime, but he has no evidence to prove his innocence. And because of that, he's sent straight to the most secure prison in the country, Shawshank. Andy arrives with several other new inmates. The moment they enter the prison yard, the older prisoners start placing bets on which newcomer will break down and cry on the first night a pack of cigarettes is at stake. Each old-timer picks one inmate from the line. That's when a prisoner named Red places his bet on Andy, because Andy looks quiet, soft-spoken, and fragile night falls. And the older inmates begin shouting and taunting the new guys, trying to scare them enough to make someone snap. And that's exactly what happens. One of the new prisoners starts screaming and crying, begging to go home. The guards rush in, drag him out, and beat him so brutally that he ends up unconscious. Red loses his bet because Andy doesn't make a sound. He lies there calmly, without fear, without crying. The next morning, Red hands over a pack of cigarettes to the guy he lost the wager to. The following day, Andy is sitting alone, quietly eating breakfast, when he meets Brooks, the oldest prisoner in Shawshank. Brooks has been there for nearly 50 years. Andy politely asks him about the rules, the routines, and the people in the prison. Brooks explains everything, even the tiny details, and tells him that if he ever needs anything from the outside world, he should talk to Red. Red can get anything. Hearing this, Andy goes straight to Red. He tells him he wants a rock hammer, a small hand tool. Red is surprised and asks, "Why do you need a hammer? You're not planning to hurt someone, are you?" Andy assures him that he has no such intentions. Red then warns Andy to be careful of certain inmates. He points toward a group of prisoners standing at a distance and says their intentions aren't good. The next day, Red manages to get the tiny rock hammer Andy requested. When he sees how small it actually is, he can't help but laugh. Days keep passing the same way. One afternoon, while Andy is working in the laundry section, those same three inmates who'd been eyeing him earlier corner him. Andy tries his best to fight them off, but one man alone can't stand against three. They beat him viciously, and after that, they force themselves on him. And it doesn't stop there. Again and again, they drag Andy into dark corners, beat him, and assault him. This torture goes on for almost 2 years straight. Around that time, an announcement is made that the prison roof needs repairs, and a group of inmates is selected for the job. Andy and Red get picked for the crew as well. All the prisoners head up to the rooftop for work, and supervising them is a brutal guard named Hadley, one of the toughest men in the entire facility. While they're working, Hadley starts talking loudly to the other guards. He explains that his brother recently passed away and left him $50,000. With no other family left, the money legally goes to Hadley. But there's a problem. If he deposits it straight into his account, the government will eat up most of it in taxes. Andy overhears all of this, and being a banker, he instantly realizes exactly how this money can be saved without paying a single dollar in taxes. Without hesitating, Andy walks up to Hadley and asks, "Do you trust your wife?" Hearing that, Hadley snaps. He grabs Andy and drags him to the edge of the roof. Just before he can throw him off, Andy speaks fast. "If you trust your wife not to run off on you, then you can legally give her the entire amount as a gift. The law allows a man to give his wife up to $50,000 tax-free." Andy adds that any lawyer outside would charge a fortune to set it up, but he'll do it for free. Hadley narrows his eyes and asks, "What's the catch?" Andy smiles and says, "Nothing for me. Just buy my friends a round of cold beer when it's done." The next day, all the inmates on rooftop duty sit back enjoying ice-cold beers under the sun. Thanks to Andy, something nearly impossible in Shawshank actually happened. And for the first time, his fellow inmates begin to look at him with real appreciation. Time continues to roll by, and Andy's bond with Red grows deeper. One day, the prison screens a movie starring Rita Hayworth. After watching her on screen, Andy walks up to Red and quietly asks him to get a big poster of Rita for his cell. But when Andy steps outside later, those same three inmates ambush him again. They tell him to come with them, but this time Andy refuses. They grab him anyway and start beating him. Andy doesn't hold back. He fights with everything he's got, but he's only one man and they're three. They beat him so savagely that Andy has to be hospitalized for an entire month. The one who attacked him gets thrown into solitary confinement for a week as punishment, and when he comes out, the same officer whose taxes Andy saved earlier beats that man so ruthlessly that he ends up permanently paralyzed. A month later, when Andy finally returns to his cell from the infirmary, he finds a huge Rita Hayworth poster waiting for him. Red's gift to lift his spirits. Sometime later, the warden shows up at Andy's cell with several security guards and orders a full search. They tear the place apart, and when they don't find anything, The warden's eyes land on the poster hanging on the wall. He tells Andy that normally he doesn't allow posters in cells, but Andy can keep this one. The truth is, the search was just an excuse. The guard whose taxes Andy saved had already told the warden about him, and the warden wanted Andy for his own benefit. The warden picks up the Bible Andy always keeps with him and walks away, only to stop, turn back, and hand it over again. He looks Andy in the eye and says, "Salvation lies within." The next day, the warden calls Andy to his office. He tells him a mind like his shouldn't be wasting away behind bars. After that, he assigns Andy as an assistant in the prison library, where an elderly inmate named Brooks has been handling things for years. Andy soon starts helping more and more officers with their tax problems. As the workload grows, he needs an extra hand. Naturally, he chooses his closest friend, Red, to help him out. One day in the library, Brooks suddenly grabs a young inmate and holds a knife to his throat. He threatens to kill him. The reason? The state had finally approved Brooks's release, and he was terrified. After spending 50 years behind bars, the outside world had become a foreign place. Shawshank wasn't just a prison to him anymore. It was home. Brooks wanted to commit a crime just to stay locked up. After Andy and Red talk him down gently, Brooks finally drops the knife. Once released, Brooks finds himself completely alone out in the world. He gets a job bagging groceries at a supermarket, but he can't adjust. He misses his old friends, his routine, his life behind bars, the only life he knew. Eventually, the fast-paced modern world overwhelms him, and Brooks ends his own life. Before doing so, he leaves a letter for the inmates, and reading it leaves the entire prison in tears. Back at Shawshank, the warden starts a new program that takes inmates outside the prison to work, supposedly to teach them the value of labor. The inmates agree because it gives them a chance to breathe fresh air, but the warden uses this program to his advantage, getting cheap labor from prisoners, undercutting every contractor in the region. Since inmates aren't paid, the warden gets every deal at half the usual cost. He starts making huge profits, all off the books, and Andy, being a banker, becomes the brains behind laundering all of it. He opens accounts under the names of dead people and funnels the money through them. Even if the police ever investigate, they'd waste their time looking for someone who never existed. Around this time, a new inmate named Tommy arrives at Shawshank. Young but already familiar with prison life, Tommy has bounced in and out of lockups since he was a teenager. He's friendly and talkative. One day at lunch, he casually mentions that he's been stealing for years, which is why he keeps getting caught. Andy tells him, if you're always getting caught, maybe that's a sign this line of work isn't meant for you. Tommy appreciates the advice. Later, Tommy asks Red about Andy and wonders why someone so smart ended up in prison. Red tells him that Andy was convicted of murdering his wife and her lover. As soon as Tommy hears this, something clicks in his mind, like a memory resurfacing. Tommy calls Andy and Red over and tells them that 4 years ago, in another prison, he met an inmate who confessed that one night he broke into a house during a robbery attempt. In fear of getting caught, he killed the 2 people inside. Later, he read in the newspaper that the woman he killed was the wife of a prominent banker, and the banker had been convicted for the murder. That's when Tommy says he realized something. The crime Andy was convicted for was actually committed by that thief. And just like that, the truth comes out. Andy was innocent all along. After hearing everything, Andy goes straight to the warden and tells him the whole story. But the warden deliberately refuses to believe a single word to him. Andy is the man who launders all his dirty money and knows every one of his secrets. If Andy ever walked free, the warden would lose his cash flow and his protection. So he brushes Andy off and says it sounds like just another made-up prison story. He claims he hears these tales every day. Andy promises that even if he gets out, he'll never reveal any of the warden's secrets, but the warden doesn't care. When Andy raises his voice in frustration, the warden snaps. He orders Andy to be thrown into solitary confinement for a month. Later, the warden meets Tommy and asks if everything he told Andy was true. Tommy answers honestly, yes, it's all true, and he's willing to testify in court if needed. The moment Tommy says this, the warden signals the guard standing on the platform. The guard opens fire, riddling Tommy with bullets. Then the warden goes back to Andy and lies, telling him Tommy tried to escape, so they had no choice but to kill him. Andy instantly understands how twisted and corrupt the warden truly is. Andy tells him he won't work for him anymore. The warden coldly replies that he will, because if he doesn't, the warden will make his life a living hell. Before leaving, he orders the guards to throw Andy into solitary for yet another month. By now, Andy had already spent 1 month in that cramped, pitch-black hole. Now he'd have to survive a second month. The entire prison hears about Andy's punishment, and everyone knows he's suffering for a crime he never committed. The inmates feel sorry for him. 2 months later, when Andy finally steps out of solitary, Red meets him. Andy asks him quietly, "Do you ever think you'll get out of here?" Red chuckles and says, "Maybe when I'm so old my brain stops working." That's when Andy tells him he's going to Mexico once he's free. There's a beautiful little town by the ocean, a place where a man can forget the world. He says he'll open a small hotel there and fix up an old boat, and he'd need someone on the outside to bring supplies, hinting directly at Red. Red shakes his head and says, "Hope is a dangerous thing, that it can drive a man insane." He starts to walk away, but before he leaves, Andy makes him promise something. He gives Red an address. Andy says, "If you ever get out, go to a field. You'll find a big oak tree standing all by itself. Under that tree, there's a rock wall, and on that wall, a black stone that doesn't belong there. Under that rock is a box. When you're a free man someday, open it." Then Andy walks away and heads straight to the warden's office. He organizes all the warden's papers and locks them neatly inside the special safe. The warden hands Andy his suit to press and his shoes to shine. Andy takes the clothes and returns to his cell. Night passes and morning comes. As the cells open, every inmate steps out, except Andy. In 20 years, this had never happened. Red starts getting anxious. A guard storms toward Andy's cell, furious. But when he looks inside, his eyes go wide. The cell is empty. Andy is gone. When the warden opens his shoebox the next morning, he freezes. Inside are not his polished shoes, but Andy's old worn-out ones. And right then, the emergency siren blares across the entire prison. That alarm only meant one thing: an inmate had escaped. Furious, the warden rushes straight to Andy's cell. When he gets there and sees it empty, his face turns red with rage. He immediately orders the guards to bring Red in, since he was Andy's closest friend. Standing calmly, Red says, "How would I know where he is?" The warden loses control. He starts hurling rocks at Red in anger. One rock hits the large poster on the wall, and instead of bouncing off, it punches straight through. The warden storms up to the poster, rips it down, and his jaw drops. Behind it is a deep tunnel carved straight through the wall. The guards stare in disbelief. The very wall considered impossible to break. Andy had tunneled through it for 20 years without anyone noticing. The guards crawl to the other end of the tunnel. There they find Andy's old clothes, the warden's polished shoes, and the tiny rock hammer, the same one Andy had asked Red for 2 decades earlier. With that hammer, Andy had chipped away at the wall night after night, hiding the crushed stones in his pockets and sprinkling them across the yard. Year after year, inch by inch, he created a perfect escape route, so flawless that no one ever suspected a thing. The night Andy finished preparing the warden's documents, he pulled off his final trick. He placed the Bible inside the warden's safe, making it look like a stack of files. Meanwhile, he walked out with the real documents hidden under his arm. He put on the warden's freshly pressed suit, slipped into his polished shoes, and covered them with his old clothes. When the lights went out, Andy crawled through the tunnel, broke open a sewage pipe, and dragged himself through the filth until he finally emerged outside the prison walls. He escaped from a place no one had ever escaped from. The next morning, Andy walked into a bank and withdrew $570,000. Not only a free man, but a rich one. Then he mailed every piece of evidence to the media. Documents showing how the warden exploited prisoners, forced illegal labor, and laundered dirty money. The following day, the story hit the newspapers. When the warden opened his safe, expecting to find his precious documents, all he found was the Bible on the first page. Andy had written, "You were right, salvation lies within." As he flipped through the pages, he discovered a hollow space carved in the shape of the rock hammer. That's where Andy had hidden it for all those years. The warden realizes in shock that the very first time he held Andy's Bible, the hammer was inside it outside. The media and police arrive to arrest him. But before they can enter, the warden puts a gun to his head and ends his own life. Sometime later, Red finally gets parole. He's given a state job, but the outside world feels just as strange and lonely to him as it did to Brooks. He lives in the same room Brooks once did. At one point, despair overtakes him too, until he remembers the promise he made to Andy. Red travels to the address Andy gave him. In the middle of an open field, he finds the huge oak tree. Beneath it is the stone wall, and on top of it, a black rock that doesn't belong there. Red lifts it and finds a buried box. Inside are some money and a letter from Andy. In the letter, Andy writes that he's waiting for him by the ocean, in that little town in Mexico he once described. At the end of the letter, Andy writes, "Hope is a good thing." The next day, Red journeys to Mexico. On the beach, he spots Andy sanding and repairing his boat. Red smiles. Andy looks up, and both men walk toward each other and embrace. With the waves crashing behind them, the dream they always talked about had finally come true, and that's where the story ends.